Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So happy it posts today, everyone. And this evening, thought, and there was a request to reflect a bit on the recollection of the Devas. And I've already talked about it a little bit, and it's come up. And this is something that we've talked about when we gather and in the Wednesday talks. It comes up from time to time. And some people tune out. They turn off their videos. They go eat eat some cereal or something. But others, this is an interesting topic. But having done a poll throughout the group, it's not a terribly like relevant to your daily life topic, and I get that, and it's our reality in the West. I have heard that when those monastic teachers who've grown up in Asia and have deep samadhi come to the West, they're often quite surprised at how few devas they see, and the preponderance of hungry spirits roaming about our airports and our subways and convenience stores, I imagine. Just caught on the idea of getting places and doing stuff and responsibility and how there's very little land in America, at least, that hasn't been razed to the ground at some point in the last couple hundred years. Is very, very rare, such that we actually mark these places now. We say this is virgin forest because it's extremely rare. And those are the kind of conditions where, this sort of spirituality, the animistic side of human existence tended to flourish. These mystical spaces that are old and untouched by human hands. But when the Buddha suggests the recollection of the Devas in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Elevens, he is suggesting it for a particular purpose. He says that when you reflect on the Devas, you can reflect they got reborn in their state, and it's considered a fortunate state to be reborn as a Deva. Even a low Deva tends to have more pleasure and less suffering than even the most fortunate human being. So you look at the Devas and you say that, well, they've been reborn in a fortunate state. Now, why were they reborn in a fortunate state? And the Buddha says, well, they were reborn because of their faith. They were reborn because of their sila, their morality. They were reborn because of their learning, and the word is sutta. So the things that they had heard and learned and digested and understood. This is, somebody who is curious and explores and learns about their world, has a much more open mind. This can cause you to be more open to the world and be reborn as a deva. Also, their chaga, their generosity, or their open-handedness, or their wisdom. Wisdom has a wonderful protective quality on the mind so that we're not drawn intensely towards the next thing. There could be a gap, an in-breath between existences where you really take stock of your priorities and maybe going and being reborn in a particular place because you like the food or because you think you are of that nationality. Maybe you reflect on it with wisdom and you say, wait, that's a really bad idea. I just died. I have no nationality. I have no favorite food. I have no favorite anything. That's decided, in an existence. Yeah. So I get to choose. I get to change. And these are reasons why beings can be reborn as devas. So we reflect on that. We say, oh, I've heard about this deva in this existence. They got there because of faith, sila, learning, generosity, wisdom. And then you reflect, I too have some measure of faith. I too have some measure of sila. You all do. You just took the precepts. I too have some measure of learning. You're sitting and listening to a Dhamma talk. This is like, 2% of humanity kind of activity. Yeah. You reflect on your generosity, your open-handedness, your ability to share and to um, not hoard things. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I too can do that. I too have given dana. And you reflect on your wisdom. You're like, I'm learning about the world. We keep saying all things are impermanent. All things are impermanent, right? It's kind of cliche at this point. You're like, yeah, yeah, we know all things aren't permanent. They're subject to change. They're passing away, aging. Yeah, we get it. We get it. We're going to die someday, whatever, whatever. But this is actually, once you think about it, it's like, well, I didn't always think this way. I've been growing. I've been developing in wisdom as a person during this lifetime. And you say, oh, so all of those conditions that cause somebody to be reborn as a deva, I too have these conditions. And while this doesn't mean that you know in any specific way your destination at death, or what circumstances are going to arise, you don't even know when you're going to die, what state of mind you'll be in. Nevertheless, it can give you some sense of security and even joy reflecting in this way. Yeah, because you'd say, well, whatever might happen at death, I can have at least this much confidence that my destination probably won't be a bad one because I have all of these conditions which lead to a positive rebirth. Yeah, now you don't know for certain, but you have been setting the conditions for that. So for many of us, this is about the best we get in terms of like our approach to all of this stuff in the Pali Canon that deals with devas, right? Is this understanding like I don't know, but I've been doing good things. So if it turns out when I die that any of this is true, I'm better off. And as we've reiterated many times, this is called the wise man's gamble. It's sort of this idea of if you don't know, but there are two options: are you can just pretend there is no afterlife, and if you're wrong, it's a very bad destination. If you're right, it doesn't matter because there is no afterlife. But if you plan for an afterlife and it turns out there is none, you didn't lose anything. You had a good life. But if it turns out there is an afterlife, then you win big. You win the jackpot. You prepared for it and you get a big payout. So it just makes sense in both cases to think this way. And we can see if we just reflect on it. And this is not just I mean I am a religious figure, I'm clergy, I'm a priest. So I've reiterated I like religion. I think religion is a positive thing. I know it's like everyone's like, no, they're not so sure in the West. But when you look at the effect that religion has on people, this is something that even the most scientific minded of people can verify for themselves with double-blind tests and polls and statistics and anything that people who have religion, people who have confidence and faith and a sense of the afterlife have less stress around dying and loss. Because they don't see it as a hard stop. They don't see it as actual loss, as an end. They just see a continuation. And this has positive effects in our life, whether or not we can in any way understand or validate what the Buddha is talking about when he talks about devas. And many of the people in the modern times who approach the suttas do so with the idea that even though if you go through the Pali Canon, probably 30% of the suttas have some reference to a deva or a brahma or a yaka or something. Yeah. The idea is that the Buddha was teaching to people in a very animistic, very on the ground, superstitious kind of people. And so he taught in that way because that's what people wanted to hear. People didn't have sciences. They didn't have chemistry and all these different things to tell them how the world functions at a metaphysical, at a atomic level, right? So because of that, they had to invent explanations for why things were happening. They tend to invent animistic explanations, and that's the idea, the pervasive idea, right? Um, but part of what I like to think develops in people over time as they read through the Pali Canon, they hear the suttas over and over again, and they meet people who have come to just a gradual acceptance of these things. It's like, yeah, no, I don't see devas, but yeah, I guess I kind of accept that it's possible. Yeah, wouldn't it be great? Is that over time we tend to open up to the idea and even just sort of believe in it, even though we might not have proof. Yeah, and it begins to make sense then why the Buddha talks about it so much is that as our mind begins to open, we might see that in certain ways, the world presented in which it is a world filled with all kinds of beings occupying every little corner of existence is actually a brighter, more joyful world where it is easier to share, where it is easier to practice sila, thinking that is benefiting beings, even ones you can't see. Yeah. Where things start to open up for us. And maybe we even start to see that some things that people pretend have explanations, um, scientific explanations, are really not so clearly defined. One example was once I entered a chat. Like three times in my life I've gone to Reddit, and every time it's been a horrible experience, right? But I entered a chat, and people were musing about this idea of dark matter. And I don't know if you know, in astronomy, there is this thing that's been happening where astronomers have these very intense calculations about the size and the distance and the mass of the universe. And the thing is, all of the calculations, they totally work. They're totally accurate, except they're not. There needs to be about 95% more mass than we can see. We can only but the equations work as long as there is 95% more stuff in the universe than what we can see. Yeah. And I just calmly suggested that, that's by definition a religion, right? You have absolute confidence that dark matter is a thing, even though you can't see it or verify it in any way. And I was immediately pushed out because this is what religious communities tend to do. And the scientific religious community tends to take a very hard stance that no, dark energy, dark matter, these are things. They are proven. You are wrong. And it's like we didn't believe in it 10 years ago, and we probably won't believe in it in 10 years when there are better understandings of things. But for the moment, every moment, we have our own understanding. And it kind of locks us out of just exploring the mystery and the wonder of the world. Yeah. Now, why is that? And we had a brunch recently when I was visiting Massachusetts, and Laura, who actually asked for the talk on the Devas, said, "Well, can you give us a bit of a primer because it's going to be a bit of time before you get to this topic." And there is something I've actually been thinking about in terms of the recollection of the Devas. It's understanding why it is so hard for us in this particular time and place to incorporate and see the world from this perspective. Yeah? And so it's a bit of a mental exercise. I just want you to try it out. And so the idea is you go to sleep tonight. And in the morning, you wake up and suddenly things are different. Yeah, you're covered in fur. Your ears are on the top of your head instead of on the side. You have a tail. And instead of two arms, you have four legs. Yeah. And you realize with shock and dismay that you have died in the middle of the night and you've been reborn as a dog. Yeah, now imagine, just imagine that you're in this scenario and there is some sense of knowledge or understanding of what you were previously, right? You're like, oh no, where's my family? Where's my stuff? Yeah. And you begin to look around, but the thing is, everything is so different. It's much bigger you used to orient yourself based on sight, but the sight for a dog is not such a great sense. But man, can you smell? You can smell in 3D. You can smell 3 blocks down and tell, exactly who's in that apartment. Yeah. This is an amazing sort of sense, and you can hear for miles and miles. So your whole orientation is changed, and you're in a different environment, but there's a family there, and they're putting out food, and they're patting you, and they're throwing a ball. And when you chase the ball, it feels amazing. It feels so right. And you're like, of course, this is the dharma of a dog. This is the nature of a dog that's been trained genetically, but yet it feels very nice. And you fetch the ball and they pat you on the head and they feed you. And the food, which normally you would be disgusted by if you were a human, it tastes amazing. And what more, like everything tastes amazing, like garbage tastes amazing. Yeah. And you begin to process this, that your world is suddenly very different. And you can't find a way back to your old world. But there are pleasures, there are interesting things in this world that you have found yourself. And you have to now process. You have a choice. And this is a choice that we have all faced and we all continue to face in every existence. The only choice that you have, you can cling to your previous existence. You can hold to it, your name, where you came from, what you liked. You can cling to it. But if you do so, this will be painful. It will be unpleasant. And no, even if you hold on to that existence, you can never get it back, right? Time doesn't move in that direction, and there's no way you can get that body back, that family back, those circumstances back. You will hold on to the memory, and it will slowly hurt you, but that is as close as you will ever get to that existence. Or the other choice is that you can let it go. You can accept that was my existence, but this is now my existence. And I can just make the most of it. I guess I'm a dog. And you're like, well, I guess I'll do the best I can in this existence. I'll find a way to be happy here. Yeah. And so you let go of that existence because it's not suffering to do so. And it allows you to fully embody the existence you're now in. Right? So I want you to think if you made that decision to let go of the old existence and just accept the one you're in, how long would it be before that old existence started to fade from your memory? And because it's so weird, because it's so different to have only two legs and 2 arms and to see and so many colors, but not be able to smell really well at all, because it's so different, so eventually you lose touch with it completely, such that you don't even remember. It doesn't even seem real anymore. Can we imagine that? Yeah, that this is something that happens. And I'd like to suggest that this is exactly the process that we went through when we were born into this current existence, right? We woke up, we were this wriggling little worm of a human baby, and we were completely dependent on the people around us. And we might have had some semblance of where we were before. But when we tried to hold on to that, we just quickly lost touch with it because it would hurt us to hold on to what we were. And maybe you meet young children who'll just talk about where they were before and what they were doing and the relationship between people. But as they get older, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, they stop doing that. Yeah. And they adjust to the life they're in. And that, even if it was a good story, it no longer has much importance to them. Yeah. And they are who they are now. So why is it that reflecting on the Devas seems so surreal? It seems like we're talking about like cosmology and astrology and all of these things, but it's not anything that has an impact on our life. Well, I'd like to suggest that we take that premise of letting go of our past existence and turn it around for a second. Why is it our ideas of the universe are so stuck. They are so solid. They are so hard and fast. And I'd like to suggest that it's because we did that process to become human beings. The reason that the Deva worlds seem so weird and surreal is because we have acclimated to being human beings. The karma, the actions that cause you to be reborn as a human being, is the ability to follow rules, the ability to keep sila, the ability to exist in a society and agree to the rules of that society, of that community, to mesh. Because human beings are social animals. Even the most hermetic person who goes off into the wild does not exist on their own. It is extremely hard for a human to exist on their own. We depend on each other. This is the nature of the world in which we've been born, but it's also a world in which we are completely dependent on the solidity of it. We don't get to do anything that breaks the rules of physics. Yeah. Well, the body gets up and it does stuff and it lives out its life and it gets affected by the karma, the vipaka karma of choices that we've made. But at the same time, it's not us. Our mind is sort of like in the driver's seat, but it's not the car itself. Yeah. The body is going to go through its processes and it's going to eventually die. And this is the nature. We can't do anything about that. None of our mental processes really affect the body, except in one way. When our mind gets stressed, the body gets stressed. But it doesn't work in the reverse. Like if our mind is relaxed, then the body is less stressed. It goes back to equilibrium. Yeah, so that is the limit of our mind's effect on the body. We can make it unhealthy. We can make it distressed. But if we relinquish all of our meddling in the affairs of the body, we see that the body tends towards balance, it tends toward health and equilibrium, and it will live out the remainder of its karma, of its lifespan, more or less, however that's going to go. So however many years that you have been alive, you have been acclimating to this way of seeing the world. That this world is tangible, this world is solid. If you can see something, it is real. If a group of people are together and only one of them sees something and the other people in the group don't see it, it's not real. The nature of human reality is it's a shared reality. We agree to things. And if you got somebody who's going, I see sprites leaping from leaf to leaf on that tree, then if 15 other people say, well, I don't, then we collectively decide that that person's insane. Yeah. And we try to figure out if there's a pharmaceutical we can give them so that they stop seeing the sprites. Because it sounds dangerous for them to see the world like that. Yeah, this is what we do in society. We figure out, is this a problem? Yeah. And we agree. And this has been enforced on us. Yeah. So part of part of the wonder of going into the Pali Suttas and looking at all of this is breaking down this conditioning that we don't even realize we have. Yeah, we've been conditioned to see the world from a human perspective. Yeah? And the Buddha says he actually refers to the human existence as a fortunate existence. Now, you've probably heard that, right? In a lot of traditional Buddhist cultures, it's considered like, oh, the Buddha's saying being a human is a good thing. And I've often reiterated, it's like actually the Buddha it's sort of like being a human being is the bottommost layer of what is considered a fortunate existence. Yeah, this is the beginning of fortunate existences, and it gets better from here. Yeah. It's to sort of compare it to an animal existence, which is an unfortunate existence, or farther down, a ghost or a hell being existence, which are very unfortunate existences. And the thing about humans and animals is we both share this kind of very substantial four elements based existence. And then all of the other existences fan out from that, and they don't have that sense of solidity to them. Mhm. So I thought to maybe just kind of give a little rundown. If you do read the suttas, you might see references to different kinds of devas, and you might be wondering, like, what is this? How does it fit? What is its function in this Buddhist cosmology? And I thought I would, if anything, this can be just kind of like help you better understand the suttas when that occurs. You might never see these beings, but then again, opening up to the idea of them, then when you see references to them in the suttas, you might not be so thrown off. Yeah? So at the bottommost layer of devas are what we call Bhuma devas. And as with all the devas from this point on, they don't have coarse physical bodies like we do. They are not stuck in the laws of physics as our bodies are. They have subtle bodies that are shaped largely by their mind, by their kamma, generated by their kamma, but also subtly shaped by their mental experience. Yeah, it's sort of like the body that we have in a dream, but a bit more persistent. Yeah, because the body that they get is it is generally often they have parents or they're born from eggs or something. Yeah, they have a reason that they're born into that existence. But they're called Bhuma Devas. Bhuma means earthbound. And this is a layer of the Devas that is not its own realm that the Buddha talks about, but it is all those Devas who are so used to referencing this physical reality that they dwell very close to it. Yeah, and this is where we have animism or the idea that there are spirits in things here in our world. It is often dealing with this reality that there are devas who are bouncing about. We can't see them necessarily, but they refer to our reality, and that is a shared reality for them. Now, they see it very different, sort of like a dog sees this same reality. They're in the same reality as us, but they perceive it based on sound and smell. Their reality is very different. Their world is very different. They can smell the paint on the wall, but for a human, that is a white wall, right? We reference it completely different. So for the Bhumadevas, they are technically using the same world that we are, but they see it totally different. Yeah. And they're almost like the animal realm, there's almost no limit to the different varieties of devas at this at this level. Yeah. So when the Buddha talks about realms, he'll give I don't even know what the counting is. There's many different ways of counting it, but he talks about there is the realm of the four kings. And this kind of subsumes all of the Bhuma Devas and then Devas in the sky who are referencing the atmosphere, Bhumas in the Devas in space, referencing different planets and cosmologies and stuff. This when the Buddha talks about realm, it's not so much that it's a place. As I said, some of the devas reference the earth very closely, but others don't really reference the earth at all. They have their own kind of places that they dwell in. It's more like a hierarchy. It's more about a level of authority. Yeah. So the way I think about the realms, the deva realms that the Buddha talks about, is this is how much authority a being in that level of existence has. So if you think you have animals and you have an ant, right? But then an anteater comes along, it can just scoop that ant right up. It has way more power, way more influence, way more authority. The anteater goes and it digs a burrow. It has its own communities. Yeah, it has a lot more power than an ant. Yeah, and on up like a tiger has more authority, more power than an anteater. It can do whatever it wants with the anteater. Yeah. And this is the hierarchy in the animal realm. But now in the human realm, the a human child, well, the kind of the bottom of the rung in terms of human beings, can level an anthill. They can kill an anteater. They can through various means, human beings can eliminate any animal on the planet. Yeah. We have complete authority over the animals. We have more power than they do, because of our ability to think, our ability to use tools, so many different things. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not abused in a lot of ways. But this is kind of how the universe works. This is a more fortunate existence, therefore it has more power and authority than the ones below it. Even the lowest human has more authority than most animals. Yeah, a little human child has like a pet gerbil, right? It owns that gerbil. It controls when it eats, when it sleeps, where it goes. That's kind of how it is. So when the Buddha talks about the Deva realms, their levels of authority. So the realms of the four kings is this idea that you have this vast cosmos of all kinds of little beings floating about that can take almost any form based on their different kinds of the karma. And you have these different kings that kind of have dominion over different types of these beings, and that's the realm of the four kings. And there is a sutta in the Digha Nikaya number 20, that deals with, if you want to read it, it just goes through in poem and verse and visuals of like running through all of these different kinds of existence. And you'll see very quickly it's a mess. There's so many different kinds of existence, so many tens of thousands of different kinds of devas in this realm. And so while the Buddha gives us, it seems very clean, very orderly way of looking at the cosmos, where there are these steps. The reality is it's mayhem, right? And so if you've ever heard somebody talk about spirits or angels or ghosts and crystals and psychic powers and all of these things, and it seems like there are no rules to it, there's no sense to be made of it. Like what's the pattern here? That's the reality of the Deva realm. There is no pattern. Like, in order for the Buddha to talk to human beings, he had to talk like it was a system that functioned very cleanly, where there were clear cutoffs for all of these different beings. But the reality is, as soon as you get out of the human realm, there is no clear structure. It is madness. It is just little is, I mean, a tree deva lives its life a lot like a squirrel in our world. A squirrel, the tree is it's its home, it's its whole existence. It never gets more than like 20 feet away from a particular tree, right? And it gathers up the nuts and it makes a burrow and it has children. That's its whole world. For a tree deva, it can be really quite the same. Yeah, they don't need to know about the four kings or the 33 or any of this in order to live out their happy little life. And before you could say it's like, well, this has nothing to do with me. There was an interesting time. So in the Buddhist time, something that happens is that often when somebody dies, people will go to the Buddha and say, what happened to this person? Where were they reborn? And the Buddha he was usually very grounded about it. He's like, this is getting tiresome. But the way he would answer it is based on their attainment. He would say, "Oh, that person was a non-returner. They were reborn in the pure abodes." Or he'd say, "Oh, that person was a once returner. They were reborn as a deva in this realm." And he'd say these different things. And so it's very common if somebody has this ability, everybody goes to them and tries to check where everybody's been going. Yeah. And this actually happened not too long ago. There was a Western monk who, one of the few who passed away in the Thai forest tradition. And after a while, some of the junior monks, so these are Westerners, they're Americans, they're British, they're Canadian. They didn't grow up in a culture where we believe in, spirits and devas and this sort of thing. They grew up in a culture where we don't. But over time, they became curious because this is very much part of the Buddhist tradition, and they started to ask their teachers, like, "Hey, what happened to him?" They wanted to know that, he died very suddenly in a very tragic accidental death. They wanted to know that he didn't go to a bad destination. And the teacher said, Oh, no, he was reborn as a tree deva in that particular monastery. And this has been very interesting to me because as monastics, I think there's this culture like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna be an arahant before I die. I don't have to worry about coming back. I don't have to worry about rebirth. But the reality is, if you're not done with samsara, you're going to come back somewhere. And it could be in one of these existences where you might not have even been able to conceive while you were a human being. Yeah. So this monk, he passed away and he liked being in nature. Yeah. And he had a lot of merit from having gone forth and done good things and kept sila. And so he had the merit to be reborn as a deva in a monastery, which is a fairly prestigious place to be reborn if you're going to be a Bhuma deva. That's how far he got after a couple of years of being monastic. Is like his mind didn't like go up into the upper reaches. It was still quite earthbound. Yeah. And this is one possibility for us is that we don't change much. It just gets a bit better. Yeah, the life of a tree deva is a lot nicer than a human being that has to worry about food and chores and bathing and all of these things. Up from this, we have something that we know, but we don't necessarily know we know, and that's the realm of the 33. And these have only a very tangential relationship to the Earth. They are not earthbound in any way. They often have their own realms. But they do have authority over earthly processes if they care to. Yeah, and they can interact with human beings if they care to, though they find us to be moving way too fast and be way too stressed about very minor things that they don't often. Yeah. And the reason we know them, but we don't necessarily know, is because they are the Greek pantheon, they are the Indian pantheon, they are the Roman pantheon. Like any culture that has like a bunch of gods up, and they all have their own little station. Like this one's in charge of the oceans, this one's in charge of love, this one's in charge of war. That's the gods of the 33, yeah. And it's not that the universe needs to have beings in charge of war for war to happen, but it's sort of like a function of the universe that there's an opening. Uh, Why is it that people get the job and the rank that they do in a corporation, right? It's not necessarily that they're the best person for that job. Sometimes there's a little nepotism and they get brought in because, they knew somebody or they had a particular thing on their resume or they're wealthy and somebody thinks they'll fit in. And this is the same way in the Deva realm. We don't need beings in charge of that, but because this being has so much merit, they can declare they're in charge of that and everybody falls in line. It works as a system. Yeah. Above that, we have beings that are called the Yamadevas. And this is a very murky, weird sort of deva that is more powerful than the gods of the 33, but in a weird way. These are called wherever you have gods that are said to like be in charge of the afterlife or the transition of afterlife or judging souls, often there's some kind of reference to a Yamadeva. The thing about the Yamadevas is they are high enough in terms of existence and authority. They are aware of cosmic processes. They are aware of the coming of going of beings, which is not something that is necessarily always understood by the devas below. But they can see it and they can understand it. But they can also know greater patterns like the birth and death of the universe. Yeah, and they can see when it's coming. And it's one reference in the suttas is the Yamadevas, when the universe is about to be destroyed, they cry and they weep and they go from planet to planet, like telling people it's like, hey, this is it. It's all gonna end. Get ready. Because nobody knows. Nobody below them is aware that that's the nature of the universe, that at some point it could poof as to make room for the next one to come along. Yeah. Above that, interestingly, more powerful than that, is a group of devas called the Tusita devas. And uh, Tuti means contentment. Tusita is the realm of the contented devas. They are more powerful than the Yama devas because even though they are aware of cosmic processes, they don't care. And that makes them more powerful and more serene than the devas below them. They could be in charge of cosmic processes, but they don't want to be. They have their own extraordinarily pleasant realms, and that's where they hang out. And they talk on Dhamma, and they delight in all of the good things that happen in the universe, and they don't get stressed out about anything. Notably, the Tusita realm is the realm where a Buddha is born, a Bodhisattva is born before they are born into their final life as a Buddha. And it tends to be one of the it is kind of the upper limit in terms of like tangible, f subtle form devas, like devas that still have bodies and are still born by almost always like specific karma. But you do have a couple of kinds of deva above that are still devas that still have subtle form bodies. And these are called the devas who delight in creating. And then above them, the devas who delight in the creations of others. The Nimanarati and the Paravasa. I don't remember how it's said. Yeah. And this is an interesting kind of deva that has the ability to create stuff and create whole worlds, sort of like an artist. Yeah, creates a world on the canvas or sculpts something into being. They can do this with reality. And then the devas above them just go from reality to reality like they're watching TV and get to fully enjoy all of the various creations throughout the universe. Yeah. And these devas are superseded only by one final kind of deva, and that is the Brahmakayika, the retinue of Mahabrahma. So the Brahma gods are beings who don't need form. They are beings who are born and they are mentally generated based on having a mind completely free of ill will. And they have immense power, yeah, immense ability to create and to immense like they're buffered from anything that goes on in the realm of form. Yeah, they can care about it if they want, but there's nothing that can make them get stressed about it. Even if the universe winked out, Mahabrahma would be like, okay, that was nice. It was entertaining. Yeah. They think extraordinarily slowly in terms of like one thought per million years sometimes when they're really relaxed. And that's not a problem for them because they live a very, very long time. Yeah. So just below them, you have a bunch of devas who hang out and delight in the radiance of one of these Brahmas who has a relationship. One of the first Brahma who kind of appeared in this universe once it got going. And every being who came after assumed that he created it. And he kind of goes with that because this is something that in the Digha Nikaya there's a sutta about the cosmology and the processes of this. And the Buddha says this is just how universes go. They come into existence and then a being shows up and there's nobody else there and he thinks it's kind of lonely. I wish there were others. And then people start to show up eventually. It probably takes millions of years. And he thinks, oh, I had the thought there should be people here, and there were. I guess I created them. And they look up and they're like, wow, you're really bright. You're really wonderful. Did you create us? And he's like, yep. And that's Mahabrahma. Yeah. So religions who refer to there is a God, a singular theistic God who's in charge and is wrathful, spiteful, or benevolent and loving. Those religions tend to be talking about Mahabrahma as an existence, yeah, and those um, beings who kind of gather around and to delight in that are the highest order. They're very close to that existence of freedom from worldly concerns, freedom from the form concerns. Yeah. There is one interesting aspect of this as you go up, is that all of these beings are still very much bound by karmic processes. Yeah. To be a deva, you can reflect is to is to still be in samsara. And no matter how wonderful and great it gets, uh, beings who are born into it, if they lose sight of the Dhamma, if they lose sight of impermanence, they're just caught in the cycle still, and they will eventually pass away, and probably eventually, though it might take thousands of lifetimes, fall out of that state back into a human state or below. And this is because they do the same thing that we do, that we did when we became humans. You get reborn as a deva and you think, oh, wait, I was a human. What happened to my family? And then after a very short time, you're like, wow, human beings they're moving so fast. Yeah, oh, they're already grown up. Oh, forget them. Let's just enjoy what we're doing now. Let's just enjoy the afterlife. Let's enjoy the party because there's lots of parties going on in the Deva realms, and you begin to forget all of the lessons that you might have learned. Yeah, and even forget the nature of reality that the Buddha is trying to teach. So there's another sutta. There's a lot of suttas about the Devas and the Digha Nikaya, to be quite honest. Another sutta, Digha Nikaya 11, is one that deals with somebody comes to the Buddha and says, like, show me some psychic powers. Yeah. And this does happen. Yes, somebody goes to the Buddha and says, "Look, the other guys, the other religious ascetics, they're doing psychic powers. Do something. It'll inspire people." And this is somebody much like us. They don't get to see devas. They don't get to see psychic powers. All they get to see is people living very mundane existences. And they want more. They want proof that there's something big out there. And so they go to the Buddha and say, "Show me something I haven't seen before." And the Buddha says, "Well, look, no." But why does he say no? He says no because you could see it. And there are two reasons that I would have that power. One is it's based on past karma, or it's based on some sort of magic incantation or something. Yeah. And there are people who have psychic powers because of their past life karma, and it's ripening in this life, and they have a particular ability. Um, or it could be from his present life cultivation. And those powers are based purely on wholesome mind states, yeah? An interesting aspect, the Devadatta, the kind of problematic guy in the Pali Canon, who was the Buddha's brother-in-law, I think. He had past life karma that allowed him to do psychic powers. So when he learned to do meditation, these psychic powers began to manifest. But the moment he began to abuse those psychic powers, they fell away. He wasn't able to access them anymore because he no longer had any present life wholesome karma to rely on. Yeah. So the Buddha says, well, forget those psychic powers. And then he tells us a story to the man about a monk who tried to figure out what was beyond this world. Yeah, what's beyond the four elements? Where is a place where the four elements hold no sway? He wanted to know, is there a realm of existence beyond this physical reality that's so tangible and so it roots us so much and obscures sort of the mystery and the wonder of the cosmos. Yeah, and this monk developed psychic powers such that he could go to the Deva realms, and he started asking around. And he's like, so where can I go where there isn't the four elements? Where can I go where things aren't dictated by physics and form and structure and karma? And all of the devas said, "Look, I don't know. Go up. Yeah, ask the guys above us. Maybe they'll know." And so this monk goes from realm to realm asking the beings, and everybody's like, "Well, I don't know that. We live, structured lives that have, kind of rules, and we follow them because it's nice." And eventually it gets to the point where this monk arrives in the retinue of Brahma. All of these beings who are kind of gathered around are really blissed out and they're so happy. And like, oh, welcome. You're one of those Buddhists, I guess. Yeah, yeah, welcome. Yeah, I haven't seen you in a little while. And he's like, so where do the four elements not hold sway? And they're like, look, we don't know, but it doesn't matter because Brahma will come and he'll have an answer. And so the monk asks, well, where is Brahma? And like, well, we don't know. Like we have no idea where he goes when he disappears from here. Because that's the nature of a Brahma. They don't have to have a body. And so beings with bodies, even subtle bodies, can't figure that out. It's very mysterious to them. Like we think he knows you're here. He'll show up when he wants to. So just hang out. And eventually Brahma shows up, and all of the Brahma Kayika Devas get really excited by this. They love when Brahma shows up. It's so bright, it's so beautiful. And the monk asks Brahma, like, where can I go that's beyond the four elements? Where can I go where they hold no sway? And Mahabrahma like says, look, I'm Brahma. I created the universe. Everybody is my creations. It's so great. And he doesn't answer the question. So the monk asks again. He gets the same answer. He asks again. He gets the same answer. Eventually, Brahma like takes him aside and he says, "Look, this retinue of Brahma, they think I know everything. Yeah, I don't want to ruin their day by like showing that I don't know. Why are you asking me? You are a Buddhist monk. Go to the Buddha. Ask him. He'll be able to answer your question." And so Mahabrahma sends this monk back to the Buddha, who is in a human body, who is sitting on earth, yeah, but who has the wisdom to see the answer to his question. And so the monk goes to the Buddha and says, where can I go where the four elements hold no sway? And the Buddha kind of says, oh, where is it that the four elements hold no sway? And he says, it is the concentration of mind, the signless concentration of mind. And he points to samadhi. He points to a state of mind where there is perception, there is feeling, there is awareness. However, it is beyond the concerns of the world. It is freed from the concerns of the world. And he says this is the one place where the four elements hold no sway, where beings are not locked into bodies, where they're not stifled by all of the rules that seem to govern us. Yeah. And this is an example of this wonderful principle of like we all of this can seem very fanciful, but as our mind starts to open up, we see that a lot of the things that we take to be reality hold us back. They burden us, they're heavy. And letting them go is the one place where our mind can be freed. Yeah. And this is represented tangibly in the recollection of the Devas. At each stage of the Deva realms, you're letting go of some coarser form of reality. As you do, you get more power, more brightness, more joy, more authority. Yeah. And so hopefully you, as you reflect on it, you also reflect on that whole progression, and you realize that you could just keep going up, but eventually you get to the point where the most important lessons you could learn are the ones right here. Yeah, the faith, the sila, the learning, the generosity, the wisdom. These are the conditions for that kind of rebirth, but they're also conditions for something much greater, something that surpasses even the highest of those forms of rebirth. And I say that it is, yes, we Nibbana is the most important thing, um, but it doesn't discredit reflecting on the devas. It doesn't make it unimportant because you could be reborn as a tree deva, and then wow, it would have been really important for you to have learned some of this beforehand, right? But um, all of these things, they go in that direction. They go in the direction of freedom, yeah? And not to get caught up on any one aspect of it, yeah? To just keep seeing beyond until you get free of it all to the place where none of these things will limit you. All right. So with that, I said we would cover the devas, we would look at it a bit. I don't have any time for questions, but if you do have any questions about it, you have read something in Sutta, you don't quite know where it fits, I am available. I mean, I have some sense of where it's located. There are not many resources, and so maybe you do have to go to a teacher. But I'd also just let you know that most of the time you'll go to a teacher and you'll ask about devas, and they'll say, "Look, don't worry about that. Focus on the breath. Breathe in, breathe out, let it all go." And that this is it's not bad advice. Yeah, that's still a very helpful thing to do at the end of the day. Uh, okay. So with that, I offer these thoughts for your reflection.